Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. It's a Hump Day Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio presented by the Nebraska Lottery, halfway to another game day. Well, that is for those of you out there listening that have finished up with your workday. My workday only just beginning here as we got a full 2 hours of Hail Varsity Radio coming your way today. But if you're lucky enough to be getting off work at 4, maybe 5, enjoy that. You are now halfway through your work week, over halfway through your work week, and halfway to another game day. Nebraska taking on North Dakota, 2:30 on Saturday. We're going to get into that a little bit more today as Northwestern is in the rearview mirror. We had comments from both your coordinators, both sides of the ball, Erik Chinander and Mark Whipple, meeting with the media today. We'll get into that here in just a second, but I am blessed with the presence of Connor Clark with me in studio today. As excited for Connor to make it here from Anderson Hall yesterday, but making it in studio today. You can find him and follow him on Twitter at C_Clark_27 is where you find Connor. He's the best young hot prospect around for play-by-play work. He's your guy. You hear him locally for our local listeners on ESPN Lincoln doing Salt Dogs broadcast. And you also hear him doing high school football, basketball broadcasts all across the state. And you hear him here on Hail Varsity Radio. And his workload is going to up here in the next couple of days. Connor, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Elijah? I appreciate that high praise.
It's been an interesting one.
Yeah.
And I don't want to divulge too much from Schmidt, but he has come under the weather during his jet lag trip or jet lag recovery day from Ireland. So unsure when we'll be hearing from Schmidt again. We're gonna see when the old vocal cords are feeling up to coming on and doing his show. But Chris is out today. We will see about tomorrow, but I do believe he's planning on being back in on Friday. So as I said, our workload is upped, but it's something we've been preparing for. We've been ready our whole lives for this, as we have a fun show planned today. Mike Babcock, he's already in the green room. I see him down there. He's coming on with us at 4:25. We love talking with Babbers. Going to get some insight from him, and he's coming up at 4:25. We'll go to the golf course at 4:40. That is about 30 minutes away as Mike Schuchart's going to be joining us, going to get his reaction to not only the Huskers falling this weekend, but also Rory McIlroy and a couple new faces also announcing they're going off to live. So plenty to talk about with Shuey in terms of golf and Huskers. Leading off next hour, we're going to have Evan Bland of the Omaha World Herald, a 5:05 appearance for Evan. Excited to sit down with him and discuss what we know about this North Dakota team, which I hate to admit it. The answer is truthfully not much, especially whenever you're looking at a team like Northwestern last week where it's game one, you're going, okay, what does this team bring? With Northwestern, the answer was, well, we should have known. Boring Big Ten football, they're going to grind it out, and they did just that on Saturday. With North Dakota, it's a team that hasn't found much success, but it's a team that's been together for a little bit, so we're going to talk with Evan about that and about what the Huskers can do to fix some of their issues in Week 1. And then to cap things off, a Jock Doc segment coming up at about 5:40 as we're going to catch up with Dr. Brandon Seifert and talk Brian Robinson. And I'll say it here, selfishly, my fantasy draft is coming up on Sunday, and I got to know if that's a guy that should be in my do not draft list. I don't know all that much about gunshot wounds. The last guy I can think of that had to come back from a gunshot wound in the NFL was Plaxico Burress. That's the one that stands off the top of my head. If you remember that whole incident in a New York nightclub with an unlicensed firearm shooting himself in the leg, and it wasn't the recovery that kept him off the field. It was the jail time. So we'll see what Dr. Brandon has to say about Brian Robinson and his odds for a return this season. Bless you, Connor. But where I want to start this off is before we get to thoughts from Erik Chinander, an article from Saturday Down South quoting host Dan Patrick, who went on his show this morning and said that sources told him that Nebraska and Arizona State are schools that could be on to something, and we should keep an eye on with the likes of Urban Meyer.
I don't know about that. That's just kind of a weird situation, and we all know how it worked out in Jacksonville. Granted, that's the NFL, and Urban had tons of success at Ohio State, but we just got over this Northwestern loss. I'm just focused on North Dakota. I don't know what to make of that, really. I haven't looked too much into it regardless today as well, but
I'm just
weird.
I'm just throwing it out there as something that was going around. And Urban Meyer has been a popular name in Husker circles over the past week, and I personally think it's a terrible, terrible idea to bring Urban Meyer and all the baggage that he brings.
Yeah.
Not only with issues at former schools to potential health issues on the sideline, which are only health issues whenever he's not enjoying the place that he is at, to incidents at the sports bar and grill around the bar that I captured. There's just so much baggage with Urban Meyer. Let's just throw that on the table of why I think it's a bad idea. But also, let's get the direct quote from Dan Patrick. Let's just say this is dreamlike and they have an opening soon. Dan Patrick said of both Nebraska and Arizona State, which, okay, easy for you to say. Those are two schools with probably the two hottest seats in the country in Nebraska and Arizona State. Okay, you're not saying much there. Let's say Nebraska could be in play for Urban Meyer, maybe hypothetically. The least convincing way you can say, well, I think Urban Meyer to Nebraska makes a lot of sense. Okay, who is your source, man? If that's the least confident source I've ever heard, maybe hypothetically Nebraska could be in play. Okay, maybe hypothetically Nebraska could be in play for Nick Saban next offseason too.
Or the national championship come January.
Yeah,
who knows?
Maybe hypothetically is the least trustworthy source I have ever heard in my life. And wanted to throw this out there, and I wanted to squash this before it becomes too much. I could say that I have a source that maybe hypothetically says that Tom Osborne is coming back for another season next year to lead Nebraska back to glory. Like, this is just so ridiculous to put it out there, especially right now when you have two schools that still, last I checked, have coaches that are still working their job right now. And I know that the hot seat talk is heating up, and Dan Patrick wants an interesting radio segment. I get it. I've been there. You want to have that interesting radio segment. You want the people at home to say, wow, this is a great segment. But this is ridiculous to be throwing out there right now, especially whenever Urban Meyer has a pretty good gig doing Big Noon Kickoff. We don't know if he wants to get back into football, and is Nebraska going to be a top of mind spot for him? Look at the places that he's gone. I know Utah's not a recruiting hotbed, but that's where he got his start, and it's right next to California. And then he goes off to Florida, a place with a recruiting hotbed where you can go in and find success. And then he goes off to Ohio State, another place, the Ohio River Valley, great recruiting spot for football. It's where the professional football itself was born. Great tradition of football there, and there's always great football players coming out of Ohio. Do I expect that Urban Meyer is going to be a guy that's going to go, you know what, Nebraska sounds like the spot for me? This is ridiculous to be throwing out there right now, first of all. And second of all, it's all just hearsay. This is just a radio host going out there and throwing it out because, well, Arizona State and Nebraska have two hot seats. So let's throw out the Urban Meyer name because you know it's going to be out there. Not only would I say, would this be a bad move for Urban Meyer, be a bad move for Nebraska. And I think Trev Alberts, should there come a point where there is going to be a coaching change being made, and I've said it earlier on the show this week that I do think the clock is ticking, I should say, but it's way too early for this. Scott Frost still has 3 huge games ahead of him that he is trying to prove that he's the right man for the job, and I'm not going to count him out just yet. While I do think the clock is ticking based on what we've seen in results, he needs a big turnaround from not only the week 1 performance, but from the past 4 seasons, and we'll see whether he can do it or not. This is premature to be saying, well, Nebraska, maybe they're looking at that. I threw out a name on Twitter this weekend, but that was just simply a reactionary. I threw out Bill O'Brien as a name, and I didn't say maybe hypothetically Nebraska could be looking there. I just threw out a name of a guy a coach that I think fits the criteria and I like. And if Dan Patrick were to say that, if he were to go on the air and say, you know what, Nebraska and Urban Meyer, it makes a lot of sense in my mind, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. I think they should go after him. That's one thing to say. It's another thing to say, I have a source that says maybe hypothetically Nebraska could go after that, because that's zero confidence whatsoever in your source, A, and B, it's just stirring up something just to stir something up.
Yeah, you mentioned it's an interesting headline for somebody to go look at and say, oh, I want to hear what this is about. Now, you mention it. There's 3 enormous games for Scott Frost left before we get back into conference play here. And I kind of thought about this earlier today when it comes to Scott Frost, how much time he has left with Nebraska, if it will come to an end sooner rather than later, or if he can salvage the season. And ironically, and I'm sure he didn't come up with this quote, but it's a coach that I've heard say this a lot, is Pat Fitzgerald. And he says, well, there's a reason why the rearview mirror is so small and the windshield is so big. And I think that's what Nebraska needs to do here, because, yes, they lost to Northwestern. I don't think they lost to Northwestern as badly as they lost to Illinois a season ago.
Yep.
There's some things that can be cleaned up. That's what these next 2 games can be used for. I said it yesterday on the show. They're very important lessons coming up for Nebraska as well, because you're pretty confident that they're going to beat both North Dakota and Georgia Southern. And then you head into that Oklahoma game, and maybe Nebraska beats them, or maybe they make it close. As long as you don't get run out of the building by Oklahoma, I think that's a good thing for Scott Frost. Now, if you lose in excruciating one-score fashion once again, then that's a different story. But if you make it close/win against Oklahoma, that gives Scott a little bit more time. But again, these next 2 games before even the Oklahoma game are going to be huge. And I mean, Urban Meyer, I agree with you. I don't think it would be good for him. I don't think it would be good for Nebraska. I think we should just kind of squash that before it even gets started.
And for as disappointing as that game was on Saturday, there was still progress in a way. In some poor coaching decisions, from not getting enough rotation on your defense through a game, to the onside kick, which we've hit ad nauseum. I don't want to hit that anymore. There's some mistakes there, which I think are an indictment of the coaching staff as of right now, but there's time to fix those issues, A, and B, look at the difference in close losses last year to the one close loss this year. Last year was close losses, playing from behind. You salvaged it in the fourth quarter, and you still couldn't get it done. At least against Northwestern, it was from the front. And I know that's disappointing and disheartening to Husker fans, but you did have an 11-point lead on this Northwestern team twice. There's progress being made there, and while it still ended in a loss, I think that does give you some encouragement moving forward that, you know what, if they can clean some things up, maybe you can hold on to that lead late.
Yeah, and I do want to say one more thing, too, with that onside kick. Now, it's not the reason why Nebraska lost, but you have an 11-point lead after that score. You go in and kick the onside kick. You know your defense has been struggling all game long, and you don't even give them really a chance to try and stop Northwestern, because if you kick that ball deep, maybe it's a touchback, they start at the 25, that's still a long field for Northwestern to go. You don't give your defense a chance to seize momentum on their side of the ball, and that's why I think the onside kick was such a big issue.
Yeah, and here I said leading off the show, well, Northwestern's in the rearview mirror. We're going to look ahead to Georgia Southern,
seriously.
And here we are talking about Northwestern again. It was a painful one for Husker fans and for me to talk about just all alike. But let's get to the phone lines here as we have a call coming in, and you can call the show 402-466-3776. We go to the phone lines now, and Will, you're on with Hail Varsity Radio. What do you got for us today?
Hey, guys. You got to remember, we were, 13-point favorites against Northwestern, and we lost. And then when he was saying that, well, if we keep it close against Oklahoma, that'll help give Scott a little more time. No, you got to beat Oklahoma to give Scott more time. These are games that are very winnable. We should have beat Northwestern. We know how that outcome was. But I lived through the 90s. We never said, well, if we keep it close. We just went out and won. It's not keep it close. That's not Nebraska football.
But it's also not the 1990s anymore, Will. Let me just pose this back to you. It's not the 1990s anymore. You know you're still in a rebuild, and I know the rebuild isn't where people would like it to be right now, but in the scheme of this season, close against Oklahoma, I'm agreeing with you, is going to be disappointing. It's not what you want, but I don't think it's a fireable offense for Scott Frost to lose to a good Oklahoma team with a good head coach, and you're not 100% sure what they bring this season, so maybe this is a better topic for 2 weeks from now whenever you're pre-gaming Oklahoma, when you know what this Oklahoma team actually looks like they're going to be this season. But you got to keep in mind that there is a natural progression to a rebuild, and while losses are disappointing, you never thought that this was going to be the 10-2 or 11-1 season. The natural progression is make it to a bowl game and show progress, right?
Yeah, but no. Wrong thinking attitude, in my opinion. I appreciate everything you do. But you got to remember, I'm a Solich fan. I was a true Bo Pelini fan. Yeah, I know how he acted on the sideline. But he went 9-3 and still got fired. Frost is in his fourth season and only 3 wins. He has 49 losses. You realize Osborne only had 49 losses through his whole career?
I did, yeah, but I'll just throw it back to you one more time, but we'll get you out because we're up against a hard break here. But
okay,
well, I think that the expectations for Nebraska football as a whole should be higher than even people around here in national media say. When you look at the influence of what NIL can do for your program, 7-5 should never be the expectation around here, and I'm with you on that. But you also have to take a step back and look at where Nebraska football has been and where they're trying to go. And you got to understand that success is progression. And if Scott Frost is still here at Nebraska 3 years from now and he's going 7-5, not even close to okay and acceptable, but you're still in a rebuild and you still haven't seen a bowl game. So while 7-5 would be, I think, disappointing for Nebraska as a whole, it's still a win on the season.
But our schedule is set up to be 7 wins. Georgia Southern, North Dakota, Northwestern should have been a win. I'm nervous about Illinois now after what they did to Wyoming.
That's a fair point.
Rutgers. It's not. We're going to be lucky to have 4 wins this year, I think.
Well, what you got to do is take it game by game, I think, and that's why I don't want to overlook.
I lived through the '80s with Turner Gill, Mike Rozier, and Irving Fryer and Remington and that whole group. I lived through that. I lived through the '90s when we got our championships, but we're not the laughingstock of the country anymore. We're just forgot about in the country, I think.
I think we're the pity of the country, and I hesitate to say we, but I'm just going to rephrase you.
Yeah.
It's the pity, and that hurts.
Yeah, yep. I appreciate your job you guys do in the afternoon. I really enjoy listening to you. I listen to you every day, so you guys have a good afternoon.
We'll appreciate you.
Thanks
Thanks for the thoughts today. And remember, you can give us a call, 402-466-3776. We do this show for you. We'd love to get your thoughts. We'd love to hit the talking points that you want us to hit. So give us a call. Leave us a review. Wherever you do that, the reviews are what pay the bills. We'll rephrase this whole conversation with Mike Babcock, Husker historian. He's with us after the break here on Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio lesson?
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome! Rolling through a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark in today for Chris Schmidt, who is recovering, and we wish him well, as a little bit under the weather right now, but Schmidt should be back with us a little bit later this week. And we thank Will for his phone call back in the first segment. That was good stuff from Will, and that's where I'm going to start it off, Mike. I know you were down in the green room, and I know that you were listening to that phone call from Mike, so I want to get into that topic of expectations versus reality, where, yes, expectations, the money that's coming into the program for Nebraska, not only from fans and boosters, but now soon to be from a big TV media rights deal from the Big Ten. Combine that with the NIL factor to get recruits here, and I think there's an overplayed media narrative that Nebraska is a hard place to go recruit and win to. It's not as easy as some of those Alabamas and Ohio States of the world, but it's still top 20 in terms of draw for recruits. So there's that expectation that Nebraska should be in the 10-2, 11-1 range just about year in, year out. But then you get to the reality of where the program's at right now under Scott Frost. And I just want to rehash that talking point with you, the fact that Nebraska, more than likely, if I looked at it right now, is probably going to be 2-2 exiting their first 4 games of the season. And it's weird whenever you start off with Big Ten, but I'll call it the non-conference slate. You're probably going to be 2-2 after those first 4 games. And I don't want to chalk down some inferior competition as wins right now, because we all know with what Nebraska's looked like in the past 4 years, those are not even close to guaranteed. But Oklahoma is a solid program. They've been solid for years now, despite the fact they have a new coaching staff coming in. I still think you like where Oklahoma's at right now when compared to Nebraska. So what do you make of the disconnect between the expectations at Nebraska and the reality of where the program's at right now?
One thing you have to consider is that Oklahoma had a slide too. I mean, there was a time there, Nebraska in the 90s, late 90s, beat Oklahoma back to back. Nebraska had 69 one game and 73 another against Oklahoma, and Oklahoma went through a period not probably as well. A good point that was made by Will. You consider that Bo Pelini always won at least 9 games and played in a bowl game. So really the situation that we have right now is, Mike Riley's, 3 seasons and Scott Frost's 4 going into his 5th, trying to get out of that. And I know that Bo's teams weren't consistently in the national conversation. They weren't always in the top 10 ranking. That's kind of where people expect things to be. And I don't think that Nebraska will ever get back to that point where it's like every season you're going to look at the Huskers and say they're going to be in that top 10 and they're going to be competing for the national championship. But I think that you can get back to a situation where you're competitive, where you can maybe win the Big Ten, get into the playoffs maybe once every 3 or 4 seasons or whatever. You can be in that position. But the thing that has to happen is you've got to have that mindset. Now, it's easy to talk about having the mindset, but there's just a fine line between going out on that field and really believing that you're going to win, which is the way it was under Osborne. Those teams, they always felt like when they went on the field, they were going to win. And I don't know that this program is to that point right now. Guys talk about it. They think that they're going to win, but they're not convinced of it. And I really felt like the Northwestern game was critical, a first step going into a couple of games that you would think that they're going to win. You said they'll probably be 2-2 now. So they beat Oklahoma. What's that other lot? No, I'm just kidding. Should beat North Dakota, should beat Georgia Southern. Had you had the Northwestern energy and confidence or whatever, then maybe you're going out on the field against Oklahoma and you're really thinking, we're going to win. We're going to win the game. Now, whether you do or not is not the point. It's the belief. And that's where I think Nebraska has to get. And that's the problem. Subconsciously, it's like, here we go again, that kind of a thing. And, the other thing is the Northwestern game, Mark Whipple today said that he was more encouraged than he was discouraged by the offense. And I think that if you look at it, one thing, it's a very small thing, but I thought it was significant. Nebraska only had one penalty in that game, a defensive penalty offsides on Ty Robinson. One penalty. And you look at the problems that Nebraska had last season, where it was at critical times that Nebraska would have a draw penalty, self-destruct or whatever. That was a big thing. The other thing that I thought was big was the fumble in the second quarter early on, where the referees ruled that Garcia Castanada's knee was not down. Think if that had been ruled the other way, Nebraska is at the 11-yard line, probably goes in. It changes the dynamic of the game, and again, it changes that mindset. So that's where I know I'm rambling, but it's that mindset, really believing when you go on that field, we're going to win.
Mike Babcock's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, is there a way that Frost can buy himself more time as the head coach of Nebraska football, or is he just kind of facing the music, waiting until that October buyout period happens? Is there anything that he can do to really solidify himself for the rest of the season?
Well, obviously win. I'll start off and say winning, not to jump ahead of you, Mike, but winning is huge. But I get the heart of your point, or the heart of your question, Connor.
I just think that Scott is not. That's not in his head at all. I mean, he's a competitor. We saw what happened when he led the Huskers to a national championship in '97. He went through some things. The Central Florida game, we've probably talked about this, but ironically, Osborne always had a predetermined, the backup quarterback comes in the first half and gets a series just for experience. And so Frankie London came in, replaced Scott Frost. He leads the Huskers to a touchdown. And then on the next series, as was the plan, Scott comes back in the game because the backup got his one series and experience, and the fans start booing. They're booing because Frankie London led them down to a touchdown. Scott Frost played through that. There were things, the fact that he went to Stanford initially rather than Nebraska. There were Husker fans that were down on him for doing those kind of things. He battled through that. No, Scott Frost doesn't give up. He won't. And one of the things I think is that they've kind of circled the wagons. We had 3 players talk yesterday at the weekly news conference. No players today. So there will be no players before the game against North Dakota. It's kind of all in-house sort of a thing. But no, Scott will not back off. And I don't think that as a fan base, people ought to be looking at it as, well, when we get to October, then that's what's going to be decided. He's going to prepare this team, and they're going to play hard, and he's going to try to come back from that Northwestern loss and get something going, whether it's a loss to Oklahoma. You can beat Indiana. I don't think there are games on the schedule after the Oklahoma game. You've got some conference games where you have an opportunity where the Huskers can win those games. Now, Illinois and you mentioned earlier, Illinois and Wyoming, that makes you wonder a little bit. But you can get the job done. That game is here, right? Illinois is here. Minnesota's here. Mm-hmm. You got to go to Purdue. That's a tough one. You got to go to Rutgers. That's just a weird one on Friday night.
Trap game.
But you can do those things. Indiana is here. You can win those games. So you still got to believe. And the coordinators today gave every indication that they had the belief that this team can get things back together. Chinander said that it wasn't up to their standard and they were going to fix it. And he took responsibility for that. Caleb Tanner yesterday was just, it's all on me. I'm taking responsibility. You've got to have that attitude. I think they do. So even though I think they needed to win that Northwestern game, they didn't win it. Okay. Rear view mirror. You talked about that. Let's put it aside. The focus has to be on North Dakota now. Can't even be on Oklahoma down the line. It has to be on North Dakota.
Yeah, there's no gimmies, Mike, with that. I mean, North Dakota and Georgia Southern, both of them respectable. We've heard the coaches say a couple times this week, North Dakota played a lot of teams tight last season, and Scott Frost made the joke about that. But it's a simple fact of the matter that though they couldn't get it done, this is still a competitive football team that was probably better than their record would indicate last season. Then you also have Georgia Southern, who, let's not forget, is led by a high-level coach in Clay Helton. Whether or not he had the success at USC doesn't matter. He still got himself a gig at USC and is well-respected in the industry. So these two games here aren't layups. And I want to pose the question to you here before we get out. Is it more important that Nebraska's offensive line? I mean, that's where I think of the shortcomings was offensive line and defensive line. And obviously you want both of them to improve, but is it more important that Nebraska establish running games against these quote-unquote lower-level teams, or do you think the defense needs to step up and show what was expected of them in preseason in order to give this offense a little bit more time to gel? Because we saw the offense, there was encouragement, but it definitely looks like they still need some more time to work together and, as I said before, gel.
Yeah, you've got to establish a running game. You've got to establish that. And here's an opportunity in these two games to do that. And defensively, you've got to, again, what Chinander said, it wasn't up to our standard. You've got to get some pressure on the opposing quarterback, and you've got to be able to stop the run. That's an important part of it. And I think all these things are things that you can work on in a game against North Dakota. Again, taking nothing for granted. And the offensive line, I thought, did a pretty good job of protecting the passer. It's the running game where you've got to get things going because, again, you've got to be physical. I thought Northwestern was more physical than Nebraska at times. And in the second half, I thought Northwestern made some adjustments that Nebraska did not make adjustments. And I think that was the difference in the game.
Mike, last thought here, about 30 seconds. If Nebraska does get the job done on Saturday, who does it need to come down to? I mean, you talk about the offense needing to establish the runner. Are you going with a guy like Anthony Grant?
Yeah, I think he's shown that he can be the guy that they can rely on. But again, they want to use multiple guys, but you've got to have one guy step up. I think he's the guy that potentially can do that. And I just think they have a ton of outstanding receivers when they're all healthy and ready to go. So I think there's a reason for optimism with the offense. The defense needs to play better. I thought that was going to be the strength. Given those two things, there's reason to be optimistic to a degree. Looking at the schedule, it's still set up for Nebraska with good home games and the potential if they can just get some kind of mindset established.
There's Mike Babcock with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Mike, appreciate your time today. We'll get caught up next week. All right, bud?
Thanks, guys.
And now,
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back in here on a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by the Nebraska Lottery, and good stuff there from Mike Babcock. A couple seconds late, so apologies to our listeners out across the state that maybe had the last couple seconds of Mike cut off. Apologies for that, but I'm professional in here, getting things back into our perfect timing as we do. So we're going to continue rolling through here on a Wednesday, and it's time for us to head out to the golf course, Wilderness Ridge to be specific, where we check in with golf pro Mike Schuchart, and we got tons to get in here with Mike. But Mike, how are you doing on a Wednesday? Still beautiful golfing weather, and I mean, the greens, from what I've seen from Wilderness, still look like they're beautiful despite the lack of rain. How are you doing today?
We're doing good. Yeah, we're still hot and heavy in the golf season, man. It's 90 degrees out and perfect golf weather.
Well, Mike, before we get to some Husker football thoughts, because we got to go there. This is a Husker football talk show. Let's get to the Tour Championship over the weekend. A huge performance from Rory McIlroy as he was 21 under on the weekend, taking home the crown over at East Lake Golf Course. Your reaction to Rory's performance this weekend and what he put together?
Yeah, pretty impressive. I mean, he's had an amazing, impressive season. He's come close a bunch of times, couldn't quite get the major, but ended really strong at the end of the year and basically won the big prize, $18 million. So that'll get somebody excited about playing golf.
Well, $18 million's nothing compared to what Liv is putting out there, and got to get there as well, as Liv Golf is taking away competition from Rory. 5 guys, I believe, heading off to the Liv Golf Tour, including number 2 in the world, Cam Smith. The money from the PGA side of things is just hard to match from Liv Golf, and by the day it feels like just another huge name going off to Liv Golf, and it's been the story of the golf world.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the amount of money that they're putting out there is hard for guys to turn down. I mean, it's just crazy amounts of money. And obviously guys are paying attention to it. I mean, I saw a stat. It's like 12 of the last 24 major winners are now on the Liv Golf Tour. So it's like, money does talk. When they put enough money out there, it's hard to not pay attention. And guys are obviously going for the money. So it's going to be very interesting coming down the next year, what's going to happen with that tour and where the players are and some of the eligibility these guys have for tournaments that the PGA Tour is saying you're not going to be eligible to play in. So it's going to be a massive power struggle.
And we talk so much, Mike, about here with Nebraska football, the NCAA losing its control over college football as a whole. And whenever Liv Golf was announced, I didn't think it was going to reach this point where the best and brightest in the game, aside from a few top names, would be heading off to Liv Golf. But now it feels like Liv, their roster of guys is so much more stacked than the PGA. And do you feel that as well, that the PGA is starting to lose their grip on the game of golf as a whole?
A little bit. I think they have enough power with some of the players that are still there. Rory's a huge supporter of the PGA, and Tiger and some of the guys that have a lot of clout. So that always helps immensely. But, man, the more you lose, I mean, I'm very surprised that some of the names and the amount of names that are going over to that tour, I mean, it's making people now stand up and take notice, that's for sure.
Mike, here, before we get to Husker football, did you hear about this Q School story from here in Nebraska, the aspiring Korn Ferry Pro, who I think said that he had 36 aces in his career. 8 of them were on par 4s, and then got into the Q School and ultimately got disqualified because he was forging his scorecards. Did you hear this story?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody in the golf world has heard this story, man. It's the hot topic right now. So
walk us through it real quick. Can you walk us through what the Q School is really and how this story came to be?
Well, Q School is your ability to get onto the Korn Ferry Tour, which then is the ability to get onto the PGA Tour. So you have to go through different stages. So this is what's called a pre-qualifier. So guys that have no status that are looking to become golf professional or touring professionals that really have no credentials behind them from a past, they need to go through this, get through this, that basically is telling people that they're qualified. They play well enough to be able to continue on. Then you go to a first stage, then there's a second stage, then there's a final stage. So it's just a massive process of elimination until you get, your top players that are finally in the finals that get their Korn Ferry Tour status, which then they play for a year, which allows them to get their PGA Tour status. So it's a long, grueling competition. I've gone through many a times, so it's not much fun. But this guy is, a guy that's had 39 hole-in-ones and 9 of them on par 4s. Mm-hmm. It's hard to fathom that somebody with that type of success has not been heard of. It's like, I know golf. I watch, listen, read about golf, and I've never heard of this guy before. You would think that somewhere along the line you would hear about a story about a guy that's making all these hole-in-ones on par 4s and par 3s, but never heard of the guy. And then just the crazy mess of things that happened, and he hit balls into trees that all of a sudden are not in the trees anymore, and he's hitting it on the green, and he's holing shots that nobody else sees go in the hole, and then they eventually went out afterwards and found his exact golf ball with his exact markings.
Still in the penalty area.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden they're not. And his response to the whole thing is like, I don't understand why I'm being disqualified. I just hit my ball. Well, did you really hit your ball? You hit one of your balls. I don't know if it was the one that you were playing, but it was one that you had, so it just, it's crazy. But, I've seen and played a lot of golf, and I've seen crazy things happen, and he's not the first guy to do something like that. He won't be the last. When you're trying to strive to get to the tour, you'll do crazy things at times.
Well, Mike, it was just pretty crazy to see a story like that coming out of Nebraska. If you haven't checked that story, I think you can Google it. A Q School Story for the Ages should pull it up. Go look it up. It's a really interesting and pretty insane story. But Mike, with about the last 45 seconds we got left here, I need to get your reaction to Nebraska Northwestern on Saturday, and maybe how Nebraska can get things turned around in your mind going into 2 games, which should be wins for the Huskers. Don't want to put anything down in pin, but talent-wise, you outclass these 2 teams.
Yeah, no question. It was obviously disappointing that you lost, but a couple things that were, I guess, positive and negative. The first half, the way the offense looked, that was pretty impressive to watch. It was fun to watch. They were smooth. They were in sync. It was really fun to watch. The disappointing part was in the second half, how our defense played. We just got beat. That was a better team that we played. It was hard to believe. They looked in better condition. They looked stronger. They looked more disciplined. We looked gassed, slow, out of position. So that was the disheartening thing about it. It's like, wow, that we didn't lose that game. They beat us in that game.
Well, Mike, we're up against it here. If you need some golf lessons, maybe go play a quick 18. Head out to Wilderness Ridge. He's your man. Mike, appreciate you taking the time today.
You bet. Thanks for having me on. Stay safe.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up hour 1 of Hail Varsity Radio, here it's Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark taking you through the show today. And as always, we are presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Schmitty getting a rest and recovery day, as both getting over some jet lag and a sickness which has overcome Schmitty. So we wish him well if he's at home listening. Schmitty, get off the radio, get in bed, take a nap, rest up, recover, flip on some Peaky Blinders. There's got to be something good out there. Maybe the new season of House of the Dragon. Awesome show. A lot out there. Rest up, relax, Schmitty. We got this handled. Where I want to go, Connor, with this last segment we got here is let's dive a little further into this Q School story, because I wasn't planning on going there with Mike, and then I realized, I kind of have to. Did you hear about this?
No, and I'm very fascinated. I wish my golf scores were as good as that. And how can you pull off that amount of cheating in golf without anybody noticing for that long? Because that in itself, I think, is impressive enough. And what was it, 39 hole-in-ones? How do you pull that off without anybody noticing?
So, yeah, he says he's got 36 hole-in-ones in his entire career, 8 of which came on par 4s, and he says that he's hesitant to include a couple of those. The people who did this story actually called him up to get his version of events and said, like, well, I don't want to count all 8 of those because a couple of those happened during practice rounds where I didn't play a full 18. It didn't
trying
really
to be
count.
humble.
Trying to be humble, yeah. But the playing group where it all went down, I think it was either last Friday or 2 Fridays ago, was the offender, Matt Moroz, along with Andrew Nee and Grant Hafner. And all 3 were hovering around the cut line, and unbeknownst to those 3, the officials that were on the course that day had a tight eye on Moroz because the day before his playing partners had reported, well, we didn't see anything fishy aside from the fact that he was playing pretty much the first shot every single hole. He was getting up way ahead of us playing these holes, and we didn't actually really see how many shots he was taking. We can't confirm because there were times where he was up on the green and we were still making our approach shot, so we can't confirm everything. So the officials had a close eye on him, and then things got wacky on that Friday, which is the final round. Started out on the 5th hole where Moroz hit his shot down the left side into the rough, and there was a tree in between him and the green, which if you know the 5th hole, it's Corey Oaks and Ashland. If you know that 5th hole, it's an uphill approach shot, and the pin was on the back side of the green, which means you can't see the pin whatsoever whenever you're playing up into the green. And he apparently hit a low stinger type shot that landed 60 yards somewhere, give or take, according to the players he was with, short of the hole. And nobody thought it had any chance of even reaching the green. And then they get up to the hole, and that guy, first guy up there, Moroz, they get up there, and he's celebrating with his caddy. It's in the hole! He's getting fist bumps all around, and nobody could believe. They're like, well, weird bounces happen in golf, but this is weird. And at this point, they did not know that there were officials watching Moroz on the day. And then another incident, I believe, at the 9th hole, another one at the 13th, and long story short, we gotta get out of here. He was disqualified for fabricating his scorecard after they found a ball, which, as Schuchart was telling us, was into the rough, and then he said, well, it came through this penalty area out of the trees and was in a spot where I could play it, so I'm gonna play it. The golf officials went back and checked, and they went and found his original golf ball still in the rough in the trees, and his defense was, well, that was from a practice round earlier this week where I lost a ball. That wasn't from today. Yeah. Okay, man. Sure.
Likely story.
So he was disqualified, and just a wild story coming out of Ashland, Nebraska on the Q School. And as Shuey was saying, it's made its way around the world of golf.
That's crazy. It's a local story, too, which is even crazier.
Yeah, local story. And it sounds like this guy kind of plays golf courses all around. Not a Nebraska guy, Moroz, but wild story. I promise we'll get back into Husker football after the break. Is coming up leading off next hour. Evan Bland of the Omaha World Herald is going to take a look at North Dakota and the task Nebraska has at hand. That is next here on Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back in, it's Hail Varsity Radio presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark filling in today for Chris Schmidt, who's got the day off. Bit of a jet lag day for him and sickness day too. We'll get into that, but excited to welcome in Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald. You can find him on Twitter at Evan Bland OWH. And Evan, never a dull week in season for the Huskers, and this week is obviously fitting that to a T. So how are you doing this week? You staying busy or just what's up with you?
Yeah, hanging in. You know, I did not make the trip to Ireland, so it's been interesting seeing everybody come back.
No jet lag for you, huh?
No, it was a quick trip from my TV to writing on Saturday. But no, it's interesting to see everybody get back. I'm excited for a home weekend and chance to lay eyes on this team and to see how it goes in person. But you know, it's unfortunate in a lot of ways that the season got off to the kind of start that it did for another year here when people are trying to get some momentum and build up some excitement for things. But, you know, obviously 11 games at least still to go this season, and, you know, we'll see where it goes coming off a disappointing opener.
Yeah, and Evan, with the North Dakota team that's coming to town, it's not like they're a very well-known team around the country, even in terms of national publications writing previews for this North Dakota team. So as you look at this team that Nebraska faces, what are some question marks for you, at least from North Dakota, them playing in their first game of this season? I believe they have a returning quarterback, a lot of returning talent, and a team that's been together for a while, but they haven't gotten the job done thus far. So what are your questions, maybe some unknowns about what the Huskers face on Saturday?
Well, the first thing that I noticed, and something that Scott Frost made light about a little bit on Tuesday, was the fact that they were in a bunch of close games last year too. I think they went 5-6, but they were either had the lead or had the chance to take the lead in all 11 games that they played. And Scott Frost sort of made the tongue-in-cheek comment that how can that happen, right? Like who loses close games like that? Obviously poking fun at himself a little bit there, but it's a team that it looks like they'll have some experience with their quarterback, Tommy Schuster, who's been through it a couple seasons now. You hear from some of the players and coaches this week who've done their scout. Erik Chinander felt like this was a group that can throw a lot of different things at you, and he had some experience playing or coaching against North Dakota back when he was at Northern Iowa earlier in his career, and it's just, I think the danger in games like these are for North Dakota and any FCS team that goes to the home of a well-known FBS school. This is their season. Like, this is a huge game for them right off the bat to sort of show who they are and what they can be. And so in that sense, you have to be prepared for a little bit of everything, whatever kind of trick plays or different sorts of tricks that might be thrown at you. So they have a veteran quarterback in that regard. That's helpful for them. And then, on the defensive side, they lost quite a bit, it sounds like. They're starting, I suppose they're resetting a lot in their front seven. And, they have a handful of players, but again, it's a new season for them too. Not a lot of film on them. They're traditionally, a winning team at the FCS level. And again, typically these are games, and Nebraska's never lost to an FCS school. And typically they will roll in these kind of games, and they probably need to do that this weekend coming off the loss that they had. But it's a number of unknowns, and I think as much as Nebraska sort of had the advantage last week with Northwestern and the Wildcats not knowing what to expect, I think any edge North Dakota might have is paid back this week a little bit, because you just don't know exactly what their offense is going to look like. And
tell me, Evan, what do you think the difference is between a Hawk and a Fighting Hawk? It's a North Dakota Fighting Hawks, and I don't know. I've never seen a Fighting Hawk, and I don't know the difference. So, in your own words, what do you think that difference is?
Well, for what it's worth, they used to be the Fighting Sioux, and they transitioned out of that a number of years ago. So I imagine they're trying to keep their fighting designation. But there are the Hawks out there. I always kind of thought that the fighting part was implied. Like in any mascot, like you're not just going to roll over, right? You're going to be fighting. So I thought that was implied. They decided to go ahead and make that extra clear. So if there was any doubt, these Hawks, they're not complacent. They're going to be fighting.
Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald. And, Evan, I'm going to flip around that original question and take a look here at Nebraska. We've seen them once, and I think there was a lot of learning to be done, not only within the team, but within the coaching staff as well, about what this team even is this season. So I want you to start this off. What's a problem that you think we saw last week that should be an easy fix for this coaching staff and for this team, and you think is going to be less of an issue on Saturday?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, to me, the big two concerns were the line of scrimmage both ways. Mm-hmm. I mean, Nebraska struggled to get the running game going. They had two explosive runs. The Anthony Grant touchdown obviously was the highlight, but they had a hard time getting that thing going. And then on the other side, just the way Northwestern was scheming things up, it was proved difficult for Nebraska to slow the run. They didn't get any quarterback pressures in that game, which is concerning as well. I mean, you can kind of make the case either way. You can say on the offensive side that, hey, as this running back rotation settles in, as this offensive line gets used to playing with each other, maybe that translates into a better ground game. I think on the other side, you can say that if there has been a strong internal belief all offseason that Nebraska's edge rushers indeed might be the deepest position group on that team, then maybe that starts to show up against teams that are going to take more chances than Northwestern did, right? Northwestern played for field goals. They would run it on 3rd and long on multiple occasions. So you would think that when teams maybe take more of a chance, that pass rush would sort of assert itself into the game. So I think that's probably where I would come down is defensively. That's the side of the ball that has the continuity. That's the side of the ball that has some of the best leaders on the team. So it seems, from my perspective, that again, if you're talking about North Dakota or Georgia Southern or even Oklahoma, which likes to pass it around, those are the sort of teams that this defense might be best suited to stop, again, because of their ability to rush the passer, or at least what we saw during the off season and in fall camp. So I think that's probably where it'll be. I would be dishonest to say that I wouldn't be concerned about both sides of those things, because you hear players and coaches in the last couple of days. The issue wasn't effort, right? The issue was blown assignments. The issue was things that are maybe harder to correct during the season. There was a lot of talk about missed tackles specifically. How do you correct that in the season? It's hard to do. You don't want to put your top offensive guys at risk and so on and so forth. So some of those things need to be corrected in the game. You can only do so much preparation in the week leading up to it. You have to do it or not, right? So I think there's a lot of concern that was revealed on both sides of the ball, but I would say, again, the defense has more of a track record that it can be a little bit better, certainly, than what we saw Saturday.
Yeah, Evan, I'm with you whenever you mention the fact that we had Chinander get up there today and say, I don't think that the defense struggled because of a lack of effort, and then my mind immediately goes to, well, that means it's a lack of technique, it's a lack of physicality, because Northwestern came in and out-physicaled this Nebraska football team. So if it's not effort, then it's got to be something else that's less fixable. So did your warning bells go off when you heard that as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think one of the questions going into the season was, how do so many new faces, both coaches and players, come together quickly? And I think we saw some examples of that, at least from a player perspective, on the defensive side, because you go back and you look at who got the bulk of playing time, especially on that defensive line, and I think Ty Robinson had 71 snaps, but you go from there, you see Stephon Wynn, Devin Drew, who were your big 2 off-season transfer ads. Those guys had 20-some snaps each, and so I think part of the takeaway in hearing from Scott Frost and Erik Chinander was this idea that you're probably going to have to rotate those guys more. You needed sort of a game, some live action to really see what some of these guys were made of. And to their credit, coaches have said that those guys earned more snaps, moving forward into the future here. So I think that's part of it too, is you're still, even though you've had an off season and you've had fall camp, you're still sort of figuring out who you can trust, who is reliable in a game setting. Devin Drew is an example of a guy who's still getting up to speed after he arrived late in camp. So, I do think there's definitely room to sort of project better things for this defense, just because these coaches and personnel are still figuring things out. And if that old saying that a team improves most from its first game to its second is true, it feels like it might be all the more true, again, with so many new faces that are getting integrated into this thing.
Talking with Evan Bland here of the Omaha World Herald. You can find him and follow him on Twitter at EvanBlandOWH. And Evan, probably last thought here before we get you out, and really appreciate your time here. Which side of the ball do you think has more to prove in this game on Saturday? The defense, obviously, Saturday was not up to their standards, and they're going to look to make that thing right. But the offense, it feels like, had more quick fixes potentially to get the offense in rhythm and to go be able to perform down the stretch of a football game. So which side of the ball do you think is going to come into this wanting to prove more to not only the fans, but to the rest of college football as well?
I think it's got to be the defense. I mean, that's the side that has the veteran vocal leaders. That's the side that has sort of the systemic continuity in coaching and in system and scheme. And they were not happy with how things went. I mean, Caleb Tanner, you heard from him earlier in the week. He said he's been involved in all 30 of Nebraska's losses under Scott Frost. He said this was one of the hardest ones to absorb, just because of what he saw in the offseason, what he felt like this team could be and still can be. And so to not, again, put any pressure on Northwestern's quarterback, that didn't sit well with them. To not really be much of a factor as a defense in terms of getting takeaways didn't sit well. And so I just think that's the side of the ball that they just, they didn't do what they felt like they could do. Whereas on the offensive side, certainly the fourth quarter was not what they were looking for, 0 for 3s on third downs with a couple interceptions, but you could see what that can be. I mean, you saw what Casey Thompson could do. You saw glimpses of what these transfer receivers can do, what Travis Vokalek can be. The running game certainly can improve, but you saw little flashes of what Anthony Grant can do. To me, on the defensive side, there's just not a lot to hang your hat on from that first week, and especially when you think going into the season that Nebraska might have had to rely on these black shirts, and then to see that script flipped so quickly, I just think those guys certainly believe that they have a much higher ceiling and have a lot to prove moving forward.
Evan, I know I said last stop, but I do have one more for you here, actually, because I want to flip to that offensive side of the ball. What's your concern level between A, the drops from the receivers, and B, the lack of push from the offensive line? Because both things really hindered that Nebraska offense on Saturday. And the offensive line, the push and the running game opening up holes has been an issue for a couple of years now. And you could probably say the same thing for the receivers with lack of being able to get open and drops when they finally do get open. So which of those do you think is a bigger concern in your eyes as you look ahead to these next two football games?
Oh, definitely the offensive line. I mean, the drops were unfortunate, and they fizzled some drives for Nebraska, but a lot of those guys were playing either their first major college football game or their first game at Nebraska. You can kind of see how that could happen in game one. You probably wouldn't expect that to continue, but the offensive line, that was the big question mark most of the offseason, and I think the opener didn't do a lot to sort of change that narrative. And so you talk about getting the ground game going. Some of that's Nebraska's running backs sort of finding a pecking order and getting the hot hand. But certainly a lot of that, too, is going to be how and if that line can generate a push. And it's not necessarily a young line, but it's not really an experienced line either. I mean, you have guys that have been in the program for a number of years that are being elevated into new and bigger roles than they've had. And so it remains to be seen, how this group can gel. I think it remains to be seen how committed Nebraska wants to be to the running game. I mean, what the style of offense that we saw was very much what Pitt ran under Mark Whipple last year, West Coast, pass heavy. Casey Thompson throws it more than 40 times in a game that Nebraska led for much of that game. So, I think there's a lot for that line to prove that it can get that push. That's where the creativity comments from Scott Frost came from, that Nebraska needs to scheme up more creative ways to get its running backs the ball and to allow them to make plays. And again, a lot of that leads over into everything else. If you can't generate a push, then you might have a lot of 3-and-outs and quick possessions, and then that keeps your defense on the field like we saw for 80-plus plays in the opener, and that's part of the reason they looked so gassed. So, how the O-line goes, it doesn't just affect the offense. It's going to affect a lot of things, and there's no doubt that those guys, have a lot to prove here moving forward.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World-Herald. Again, find him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. And Evan, really appreciate your time here on a Wednesday afternoon. We'll get caught up with you next week. But until then, enjoy yourself tonight and enjoy the game on Saturday, okay?
Appreciate it, Elijah. Thanks.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by the Nebraska Lottery, Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark. And as you just heard the intro say, open phone lines here for about the next 15 minutes. As you can give us a call, 402-466-3776. That's 402-466-3776. Also, 800-825-5865. Give us a tweet at Herbal Essences for me. No underscores, no nothing. Herbal, spelled Herbel, Essences. Yes, that is in reference to the hair care company. Yes, I also made that when I was in like 5th grade, and I've stuck with it because people know me by it now. So that's where you find me on Twitter. You can find Connor Clark at C_Clark_27. I nailed the underscores there as Connor gives me a big ol' thumbs up. And you can also find and follow the show as a whole on Twitter at HVarsity Radio. You can give us a tweet, and we'd love to get those on the air. We got a tweet in earlier in the show from Brennan. Haven't got the chance to get to it just yet, but he was talking to us in reference to what we led the show off with, Dan Patrick's alleged source telling him that Urban Meyer is allegedly a candidate for Nebraska whenever Nebraska, last I checked, still has a head football coach. So take that what you will, and what I'm taking from that is... well, I'm taking it with a grain of salt, is what I'll say. I don't quite believe what Dan Patrick is putting down there. But you got to drive in the listeners somehow, Dan Patrick. I get it. Whether or not that is just throwing out complete hypotheticals is one thing, and that's what I think he's doing there. But Brennan tweets in, if I'm Trev Alberts, I'd rather slam my head in a car door than hire Urban Meyer. So straight and to the point from Brennan. Yeah, there's baggage. There's baggage there, and there's a lot of jokes I could make on the air. I'm going to refrain from doing so, but there's many a joke. You can fill in the blanks with your own joke from wherever you are listening today. Where I want to go with this segment, though, and as I said, open phone lines, we can get into what you guys want to get into as we do this show for you. But I want to get into Erik Chinander's post-practice media availability today, as I didn't say anything truly shocking, anything that was truly divinely sounding inspired. It didn't sound like it was divinely inspired, I should say. It was really the obvious. And Connor, did you get a chance to listen to what Chinander had to say today?
Well, during the break while we were off, I heard a soundbite about him talking about Nick Henrich just in general, and how he thought he played really, really well. And I'm not singling out Nick Henrich here at all, but it seemed like he was a little bit more pleased with the defense than the rest of us were, which is fine. He's the defensive coordinator. He coached a really good defense last year. It's not going to be all sunshines and rainbows during the first game of the year. I get that. But at the same time, it was like, okay, what were you seeing on the sideline that we weren't on the TV screen or in the stands or wherever you were watching from? That was a little, I don't want to say concerning, but it was just kind of weird to hear his point of view be so much different than the fans, the media, everybody else's point of view. And I really like Erik Chinander. I think he's a great coach. But that was the one thing that stuck out to me. I haven't listened to too much else of it, but that was a clip that I saw on Twitter, and I listened to it, and it stuck out to me. But that was like the really only the answer that stuck out the most.
Well, the answer I'm paraphrasing for him was that Nick missed tackles weren't an issue for him on Saturday.
Yeah, he said that he didn't see a single one from Nick.
Yeah, that's looking back on a game with rose-tinted glasses, I think. And he definitely didn't sugarcoat it. We can get into that here in just a second, where he didn't sugarcoat it. He said Saturday is not good enough. Actually, let's hear that right now. He definitely didn't sugarcoat the performance on Saturday, but I think he thought there was more positives to take away from it than a lot of Husker Nation. But here's Erik Chinander talking about Saturday's performance from the defense.
Definitely not up to our standard at all. The things that I don't need to fix, kids played really hard, really good effort out there. A few missed tackles that we need to clean up. Tackled pretty well for the game, but a few missed ones that cost us some yardage. A couple, missed assignments, mental errors, whatever. All levels of the defense throughout the game that cost us some yardage once again, and those are the things that I have to clean up. That's on me to get fixed, and I will get those fixed. Other things that are concerning is, we take great pride on this unit at putting the fire out. When we get put in an unfavorable situation, we fix it. That's life. That happens in football. It's nobody's fault. We need to fix it. We need to put out the fire, and we did not do that this week, and that's got to improve. So I think those are the things that we can get corrected going into this game.
So I don't think there's any case of sugarcoating the defense's performance there on Saturday, but do you agree with my assessment that there are some rose-tinted glasses there with how he's looking back on the defensive performance on Saturday? He said a few missed tackles.
Yeah, a few missed tackles, and the effort thing, obviously, it was good. I mean, there was effort there. Obviously, you can tell the guys were trying, obviously.
But they lost their juice as the game went on.
They did. And the one thing that really concerns me, too, was the lack of push by the defensive line, because there's one of two ways that this could go. The scheme that they were running just wasn't working, or B, they just couldn't physically get past that Northwestern line. And give Northwestern's line credit, because they look bigger and better than they have in years past, especially at Northwestern. But if it's a physicality thing that they couldn't get through that O-line of the Cats, that's a concerning point to me. Now, schematically, if you didn't run that very well in Ireland, you can clean that up. Obviously, you can look at film, you can practice that, do whatever. But if it's a physicality thing and you just can't fight through offensive linemen, that's going to be a huge problem for this defense going forward. So I hope it's not that.
Well, one thing he pointed to in the way the defense waned late, I mean, it was very much a case of Northwestern's 3-4-yard runs early in the game were turning into 10, 15, 20-yard runs late in the game. And one thing he pointed to was a lack of rotation. And it wasn't a point the finger. It wasn't a we're not deep enough in the interior defensive line. It was a point the thumb. You know, you've heard that one before. He pointed the thumb himself, saying that's something I got to do better at, getting better rotation.
Got to be thumb pointers.
We'll hear from Erik Chinander here, but that's something that remains to be seen, I think, as the season goes on. Is you can't say after one game that the lack of rotation was because they're too thin there at defensive line. He pointed the thumb at himself, and I think that's what a good coach would do in this situation. But Chinander hitting on that lack of rotation.
You know, once again, my issue a little bit. You know, we had a good plan about how much to play guys. Now the game ended up going 85 snaps. You know, without reviewing the film, you don't know exactly how those other guys played. Watching the film, they played very well. So we need to probably rotate those guys in a little more. Like you said, keep those other guys a little fresher. But I think that, you know, after watching them play a game, excuse me, they've gained a lot of trust in the coaching staff to go in and take more reps.
And that's what he's saying there is going into this game, I think reading in between the lines there, he's saying, I'm worried about depth. You don't know what those guys are going to be putting on the field till you go back and can individually watch them on tape. And I think he's saying, yeah, we wanted our starting guys to get more snaps than you would have been accustomed to with the rotation last season. But now upon watching guys like Devin Drew and Stephon Wynn, there is more confidence from the coaching staff that these guys can go in and perform, and we're going to try to get them rotated in more moving forward. And that's what I took away from that reading in between the lines, that there was depth concerns, especially from him and probably from Dawson as well, with how much are these guys going to be able to come in and fill the shoes of the guys ahead of them with not much drop-off, and maybe more confidence in that later. But by the end of the game, the rotation was definitely an issue where guys like Ty Robinson and Colton Feast were looking gassed, and they were getting washed in their double teams.
Yeah, and there's going to be guys that are going to have to step up, transfer or not. And when you get in the game, your number's going to get called, and you're going to be expected to make big plays. And you mentioned guys getting tired towards the end of the game, whether that's mentally or physically, whatever the case may be. You can't let, especially a Big Ten team, run the ball 15 straight times in that fourth quarter and really just put the game away on the ground. That's not going to fly in this conference. So whether it's a backup, a third string, a walk-on, a transfer, whatever, black shirt or not, your number's going to get called. And when you are thrown out into that field, you need to make plays, and that's what you're going to be expected to do. And this D-line, it has bodies. It's not like that they don't have the talent, they don't have the skill, and they have plenty of bodies there. It's just a matter of, okay, how can we strategically use these guys, and how can we make them more successful? And Coach Chinander's been great at putting guys in positions to be successful.
Well, I think that's the hope from Husker Nation, that it isn't a lack of skill with lack of rotation, that it is, well, now we trust these guys, let's get them on the field. That's the hope for Husker Nation, because that's going to be the fix to this issue moving forward, because that defensive line did look tired. Along with the defensive line issues with the pass rush, Chinander hitting on what they struggled with on Saturday and how they want to fix that moving forward. We'll get to tackling here in just a second, but let's keep it with the defensive line and what they want to do with their pass rush moving forward.
You know, it's always huge. I think, you know, hats off to Northwestern. It's a good football team. They had a good plan. You know, they chipped the defensive ends a lot. They got the ball out of the kids' hands a lot. So they had a good plan going in to take care of that four-man rush. But it's going to be huge for us to get that thing going. You know, on defense, you also have to earn the right to rush the passer, right? You've got to get those people in 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9 plus, to earn the right to really pin your ears back and go. And we did that some, but we didn't do it enough.
So nothing world-shattering there from Erik Chinander about how they develop a better pass rush. Well, it's Northwestern schemed it well, and we need to make more plays to put ourselves in better downs and distance to get after the passer. Very much coach speak. No quick fixes there, and it sounds like no quick fixes to tackling issues we saw on Saturday either.
Yeah, I mean it's a hard thing to handle because it's you can't tackle and you can't recreate those open space tackles a lot in college football and practice unless you're going to go tackle the ones. And I think we'd all feel terrible if one of our starting receivers, running backs, quarterback, whatever, got hurt during that. So we've got to do a great job with drills, which I think we have some great drills. And like I said, the tackling was pretty good, all but a couple open space ones. One I can think of offhand, and there was a few. One got missed with wrong leverage, one got missed with right leverage, and we just didn't get there fast enough with the rest of the posse. So we're going to really break down the film and talk about technique and drill that technique without being able to get those hits live.
It sounds like to me that Chinander is kind of echoing something we heard from Kaz yesterday, which is you fix open field tackling by getting more guys around the ball. If you're one-on-one against a ball carrier in the Big Ten, you're going to struggle. It's athlete against athlete, but that's a tough play to make one-on-one, and you can fix that quickly by getting more bodies around the ball. And tackling is not one of those things that is an overnight fix, but that is something you can do to curtail some of those issues. Last thought here from Chinander before we get out here and get to our Jock Doc segment, but why Chinander is optimistic about this defense moving forward.
The guys did not respond poorly at all. The guys helped the young guys that made some mistakes out there. We got it cleaned up. The good thing is I didn't see panic. I didn't see guys going sideways. We stuck together, and that's why I still think we have a very good football team. I think we have a very good defense. I'm very confident we'll get things cleaned up, and we'll continue to get better and better every week.
And you got a big test, Connor, on Saturday to prove that you took those lessons from a tough performance against Northwestern and you applied them, because the weeks are counting down. At the end of the day, we can talk about, you can't overlook North Dakota and Georgia Southern, but these are put into your schedule in order to get you geared up. It's in order to take those lessons from Northwestern and get those things fixed before before Oklahoma comes to town. Yeah,
it's going to be 2 tough games, 2 important games. Let's see if the defense and offensive units can improve in their own areas.
And I'm sure we'll hit on that some more tomorrow, but kind of after the break, Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, a Jock Doc Wednesday. That's next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back in on a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio presented by the Nebraska Lottery. It's time for a Jock Doc Wednesday as we get caught up with Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. And Dr. Brandon, I know this isn't a Husker Talk segment, but I got to go there just briefly. Encouraged or discouraged about this team's ability to bounce back? And if you don't want to answer the question, you don't have to, but I had to start there.
Great question. Put me on the spot. No, I'm excited about them. I think they got a chance to turn things around, and you've got a home game coming up. I think they're going to turn the ship around, and I saw some really good things out there. Just kind of struggled that kind of last quarter for sure, but I think we can get the ship righted, and I think they'll be ready to roll here soon.
Well, sorry to put you on the spot like that, but let's get right into our Jock Doc Wednesday segment today, talking Washington Commanders running back Brian Robinson. I know at one point today I'm probably going to call them the Washington football team, so I'm going to prematurely put a quarter in the swear jar for that reason. But Brian Robinson, a crazy story. Lucky to be alive, really, as he was shot twice during an attempted robbery on Sunday. He was actually already released from the hospital on Monday, and it sounds like a positive prognosis. And Dr. Brennan, I don't think that you're an expert in gunshot wounds, but what was your reaction to this story?
Just crazy story. A poor guy. I think about unfortunately all the rising rates of crime around our country and everything that's involved in that. But poor guy. So very fortunate, obviously, with gunshots to be upright and back moving around and not having something more significant happen. I definitely wouldn't call myself an expert in gunshots. However, where I trained at, big city, we took care of a lot of kind of gunshots, unfortunately, back in the day during my training. So I've had a lot of extensive experience with that. Fortunately, don't have to see a lot of that now. But, definitely things that result in a variety of trauma, kind of either on kind of a mild scale, moving all the way up to really kind of devastating type of injuries. The trauma that can happen to soft tissue, whether it's muscle, bone, from gunshots, can really be devastating kind of long term.
Yeah, and with Brian Robinson, as you said, lucky to be alive, but we do have to get into this recovery timetable process because my fantasy draft is on Sunday, and I got to decide whether this guy's on my do not draft list. Only half kidding. But he was shot twice, both in the lower body, and it sounds like the more serious of the two gunshot wounds was one that was near the knee, but NFL Network insider Mike Garofalo reporting that the bullet that hit near his knee apparently missed all major parts. That's ligaments, tendons, and bones, did not create massive damage, and that's one of the reasons he's already been released from the hospital, and he was back at the Washington team facility yesterday. So with the gunshot wound, I mean, you think of there being massive damage and kind of that collateral, even if the bullet doesn't strike an area that it can still cause some damage around. So what is your reaction to a bullet going pretty close to the knee and what that can do to an athlete's career?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, there's a ton of things around the knee that can become a big issue. You alluded to some of those. As we kind of review anatomically with the knee, there's obviously ligaments that surround it. Obviously, there's the bony part of it. And even something even more generically is, just having some foreign body. We'll consider obviously a bullet a foreign body. Any kind of foreign body that goes through the knee joint itself. The knee joint itself, all of our joints are they're sterile compartments. And so when you take a foreign debris outside the body and it travels through that area, then what happens is your risk of infection goes up significantly. And so in this scenario, and in scenarios I've obviously seen in the past with significant gunshots, is if there's any question that a bullet has gone near a joint, you're going to go in and explore that area and make sure either A, did it go in or not. There's some things you can do to explore that, to assess for that. And if it did, there's a big suspicion for it, then you have to basically open up that joint and wash it out, clean it out, make sure all that debris is out of there so you can avoid, long-term infection issues. And so that'd be one of the big things we worry about. That's probably the most common thing we worry about with any type of gunshot type of wound. But again, fortunately for him, no issues into those major kind of soft tissue structures. I would say, again, with the experience I had where I trained at in a big city, seeing lots of gunshots, I am amazed how many times folks will come in with gunshots and it literally just kind of pass through the muscle and kind of miss all the huge kind of vital structures and how fortunate some people can be.
Well, it sounds like that's the case here. Dr. Brandon is just going through some muscle, but even that can cause some damage. What does that recovery look like? I know that the Washington Commanders, there's the one in the swear jar. But the Washington Commanders haven't placed him on injured reserve, and he's already a part of the 53-man roster, meaning they expect this to be a quick turnaround for Brian Robinson. What does that recovery from a bullet going through some muscle look like for an athlete?
Yeah, in some ways you can consider it almost kind of like a bad pulled muscle, if you will. So you have some muscular trauma, which is kind of similar to having trauma where you pull the muscle apart. A soft tissue incident like a gunshot wound can cause that. So you basically put them back on a pretty speedy recovery program of hitting the rehab hard, range of motion, strengthening, getting him back out on the field. The big issue there is always wanting that, wound to heal. You don't want to push them too hard where they're kind of sweating over a place where the, entrance and exit wound was, or any type of surgery was, until that incision heals up well. Otherwise, you put them at risk for infection. So that usually is kind of the biggest limiter, at least initially, in terms of how aggressive you can be with rehab, is making sure you don't push them too hard where they're sweating over a fresh incision or fresh wound. But once that heals up well, then I think he can be, I bet they'll be pretty aggressive with him in the next 3 to 4 weeks in terms of getting back to rehab and pushing him to a return-to-play program. He probably could be back in 4 to 6 weeks, at least based upon what they're telling us with his severity of his injuries not being that significant. He might be back on the field in 4 to 6 weeks.
And what about any long-term potential, maybe career shorteners to this? Is this really something where after 4 to 6 weeks, it pretty much is back to life, or normal life, I should say, maybe with a scar on your lower body? Or are there potential factors that could crop up 5-10 years down the road after a type of injury like this?
Yeah, I think what we'll probably see with him is in the first year, we're going to see if there's going to be some long-term issues that show up. Obviously, depending on how much muscular trauma was there. And then the issue there becomes, depending on that amount of muscular trauma, is how much that impacts like his speed, cutting, kind of explosiveness type of deals. And so that will be what we have to find out over the next year. But really, if it's just more muscular soft tissue trauma, I think there's a good chance that it may not have a big long-term impact for him. And again, hopefully that early return is possible.
And Dr. Brandon, last thought here on Brian Robinson. Would you prefer being a doctor seeing gunshot wounds to the legs as opposed to the torso or arms? Well, what does that look like, or is there any real difference?
Yeah, that's a tough call. You'd preferably, if you had to pick a spot, would be somewhere where there's a decent amount of kind of muscular soft tissue coverage in that area. Obviously, the worst place to have it would be in a tight spot where there's kind of nerve issues. If you hit a nerve, that's a huge issue. Hard to basically repair those and get the function back that you want, even with the repair. Versus if it's in the bone, you can fix the bone, put plates over the bone, put it back together fairly well. In the muscles, it just needs time to kind of heal. Obviously, if it's more like ligamentous trauma from a bullet, that can be pretty devastating, just because the trauma there that occurs from a bullet versus like a stretch type of injury is so much more pronounced when it's coming from a bullet, that it's harder to fix that. It causes more kind of surrounding damage as it imparts that kinetic energy on the surrounding structures.
All right, Dr. Brandon, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, a Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon, to wrap here, is it a risk to draft Brian Robinson onto my fantasy team? I got to go there.
I'd go for it. I think I'd take him. Okay. I'd go for it.
He's signed, sealed, and approved by a doctor. 1 out of 1 doctor that we talked to recommends drafting Brian Robinson, so I'll go with that. Dr. Brandon, thanks for your time today. We'll get caught up next week, all right?
Okay, buddy. You guys take care. Thanks again.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, we are presented by the Nebraska Lottery, Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark, taking you through this final segment of the show today. A little bit TBD what the plan is tomorrow. We'll see how Schmidt feels whenever he wakes up tomorrow, but plan as of right now, I believe, is that Schmidt will be back with us on Friday as we wish him good health. Coming back from Ireland, and he has been hit with the double whammy, the jet lag and the sickness. So excited for Schmidt to come back. It's been, quick math here, over a week since his last time being in studio. So it's a long vacation for Schmidt, even though he's been working while on vacation. That's a longer one than we expect from him. So enjoy the day off, Schmidt. If you need another day tomorrow, enjoy that as well. We will talk to you whenever you're feeling a little bit better. But before we wrap here, just a quick reminder of where you can find this show in podcast form. If you're listening on the radio right now and you go, man, I missed 1 hour and 54 minutes of this show, how do I get the rest of it? ESPN Lincoln's Twitter and Facebook is a great place to go check, as we'll have individual interviews posted up there. If you want to catch the full podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the Hail Varsity YouTube page are your best bet, as all those will have the full show. And the big plus of the Hail Varsity YouTube page is you get to see our beautiful faces. We had some webcam issues yesterday, and by webcam issues, I mean we only had one, so it didn't work out great to do a full show yesterday in video format. But today, the full show has been recorded, and it'll be posted up on YouTube somewhere around 8:30 tonight, as we'd love to get your feedback in the Hail Varsity YouTube page comment section, or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And last great way of getting the show is asking Alexa, hey Alexa, play Hail Varsity Radio. So if you're listening in this or to this show today in a room with an Alexa, I apologize for sending her whatever it is, haywire, but that's where you connect with the show. Last thought here, Connor, before we get out, is I do want to get one last thought in from Chinander. We ran out of time for this last segment, but do want to sneak it in before the end of the show. He previewed what North Dakota is going to be bringing on Saturday, as I kind of gave Nebraska media some insight into what he thinks this North Dakota offense is going to look like. You never really know in game one of a season. There are going to be some mysteries, I'm sure, on Saturday, but Chinander with his preview of North Dakota.
We'll have our hands full with North Dakota. That's a really good football team. They play extremely hard. I've played them before at Northern Iowa, and I've seen just how they come in for a game like this. We're going to see a lot of different stuff. You know, if you go back and watch Utah State from last year, there's a lot of stuff coming at us. So the guys got to be ready for that. They've got a quarterback that's a gamer. You know, he has a knack of making plays. We've got a couple wide receivers back. Number 4 is a really good football player. A couple good offensive linemen. I know they got a transfer junior college that we haven't seen on tape that they're talking highly about. So there's a lot of good football players, a well-coached football team. Scheme-wise, they got a lot of different stuff going on in every different personnel grouping. So it's going to be a good football game, and it's going to be a good test for our defenders to get their eyes where they're supposed to be and get their job done.
So that's Coach Erik Chinander previewing North Dakota. We'll do a little bit more preview tomorrow. As Connor, you got class?
I do. Until 4:45. Media ethics. Be there or be square.
Well, it's important to learn ethics, even though that's a real gray area. But I digress. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 4 to 6, Hail Varsity Radio. Me, maybe Chris, maybe Will Wilson, maybe Connor checking in. We'll see you. That's when we'll talk to you again, though.